Michael, a 10-year-old boy with messy brown hair, carefully pushed his mother's wheelchair along the busy streets of Columbus. His small hands gripped the handles tightly, scanning the crowd for anyone who might buy the candy he was selling. The summer heat pressed down on them, making the concrete beneath his feet feel scorching. But Michael didn't complain, he couldn't. His mother, Mary, depended on him, and selling sweets was the only way to help cover the growing pile of bills at home. Mary sat quietly in her wheelchair, her face a mix of exhaustion and sorrow. Since the accident, everything had changed, leaving her unable to walk and feeling like a burden. Michael, though young, had stepped into a role far beyond his years, helping her every day. They lived with Sophia, Mary's mother, who constantly criticized them, making home feel even more stifling. Michael felt the tension daily but kept going, pushing through for his mother's sake. As they continued, people rushed by, some with pitying glances, others not noticing them at all. Michael's heart sank with each rejection, but he pressed on, determined to sell a few more candies. He paused under a tree, wiping the sweat from his brow, and Mary whispered, "I'm sorry, Michael." He turned to her, his face serious despite his age. "It's okay, Mom. We'll figure it out," he said, trying to stay strong, though he wasn't sure how much longer he could carry this weight. As the sun continued to beat down, Michael and Mary took a brief pause under the shade of a building. Mary, her face drawn from exhaustion, looked at her son with a deep sadness. "People don't see us, Michael. To them, we're invisible," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Michael, despite his young age, was thoughtful in his response. "Maybe they're just busy with their own problems, Mom. But we're still here, together, and that's what matters," he said, his words carrying a maturity beyond his years. Mary looked at him, her heart heavy but also filled with a strange sense of hope. Michael's resilience never ceased to amaze her. Though life was far from easy, his strength and calm reassured her in ways she couldn't describe. Little did Michael know, those simple words he spoke would carry a deeper meaning throughout his life. His ability to find hope in the darkest moments would become the driving force in his journey, even when everything seemed lost. Later that week, Michael was standing on a busy street corner, holding his candy tray close, when his friend Ethan approached him, looking puzzled. "Hey, Michael, I saw something weird earlier," Ethan began, his voice uncertain. Michael raised an eyebrow, curious but tired. "What do you mean?" he asked, glancing at Ethan while keeping an eye on potential customers. "I swear I saw your mom getting out of a fancy car and walking into that hotel over there," Ethan said, pointing to a tall, elegant building down the block. Michael frowned in disbelief. "That's impossible," Michael said, shaking his head. "My mom can't walk, you know that." But Ethan was insistent. "I know what I saw, man. It looked just like her." Michael's curiosity started to grow despite himself. He had spent every day with his mother, pushing her wheelchair, knowing her struggles, and yet the thought of her walking into a hotel didn't leave his mind. Could it have been someone else? He dismissed the idea, but doubt crept in, unsettling him. Unable to shake the image from his mind, Michael found himself glancing toward the hotel every now and then. What if Ethan's right, he thought, a sense of unease gnawing at him. But the logical part of him fought back. It couldn't be her. His mother needed him, he'd been by her side through everything. And yet, a part of him couldn't resist the urge to check, just to be sure. It was too strange to ignore. "Maybe I should go look, just in case," he muttered to himself, hesitant but intrigued. As he continued to sell candy, Michael's thoughts kept circling back to what Ethan had said. He felt the pull of curiosity, stronger than before. By the end of the day, he couldn't ignore it anymore. The idea of seeing someone who looked exactly like his mother, walking into a place so out of reach for them, seemed absurd. But he had to know. When he finished selling the last few candies, he turned to Ethan, who was still hanging around. "Let's go check it out," he said, trying to sound casual. They made their way toward the hotel, Michael's heart pounding in his chest. As they neared the entrance, a sleek car pulled up, and out stepped a woman who looked exactly like Mary. She was walking, dressed in elegant clothes, and she seemed confident and poised, nothing like the mother he knew. Michael froze, his mind racing. Was it really her? He stood there, too stunned to move, as the woman disappeared into the hotel lobby. It can't be, he whispered to himself, the shock hitting him all at once. The days after seeing the woman at the hotel left Michael feeling uneasy and unsure of what to do. Every time he looked at his mother, sitting in her wheelchair, the image of the walking woman haunted him. Was it really her? Should he ask her about it? He feared the answer might change everything, and the thought of confronting his mother about something so shocking left him frozen. Michael wrestled with the idea of knowing the truth but also feared what that truth could do to their fragile world. Ethan, as always, encouraged him to dig deeper. "You've got to ask her, man," he insisted. But Michael wasn't ready. "What if it's not what I think? What if it's worse?" he muttered, feeling torn. The questions buzzed in his head constantly, and every moment at home became heavier with silence. Sophia's constant presence made things more complicated. Michael wondered if she had been hiding something all along, but he couldn't bring himself to ask her either. The weight of what he didn't know pressed down on him harder with each passing day. Finally, as Michael sat in his room one evening, he realized the burden of his secret was becoming too much to bear. He had to decide, either confront his mother and risk disrupting everything or live with this gnawing doubt forever. Ethan's words echoed in his mind, "You deserve to know the truth, no matter what." But was Michael truly ready for that? He wasn't sure. Yet, deep down, he knew the time to find out was coming closer, whether he liked it or not. After several days of sleepless nights and countless thoughts racing through his head, Michael made his decision. He couldn't keep living with the doubt gnawing at him. One morning, he got up earlier than usual, determined to confront the woman he saw at the hotel. His heart pounded in his chest as he hurriedly dressed and met Ethan outside. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked, but Michael just nodded. There was no turning back now. He had to know the truth, even if it meant everything changing forever. They made their way back to the hotel, Michael's heart racing with every step. His mind buzzed with questions. What if she was really his mother? What would he even say to her? As they reached the hotel, the sleek car appeared once again, parking in front of the entrance. Michael's breath caught in his throat as the woman stepped out. She looked just like his mother, dressed in expensive clothes, walking confidently. Michael could barely move as he watched her, the image of his mother in the wheelchair clashing with the woman walking before him. Summoning all his courage, Michael stepped forward. "Mom," he called out, his voice trembling. The woman turned to look at him, confusion crossing her face. "Excuse me? I think you have the wrong person, dear," she said, her voice kind but firm. Michael's heart sank. He was sure it had to be her. "You look just like my mom," he said, pulling a photo of Mary from his pocket and holding it up for her to see. The woman's eyes widened as she stared at the photo, her expression changing from confusion to shock. That can't be," the woman whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for the photo. "This woman, she's my sister. My twin sister," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Michael stood frozen, his mind racing as he tried to process what she was saying. A twin sister? How could that be possible? The woman, who introduced herself as Abella, seemed just as shaken as Michael. "I thought I lost her forever," she murmured, her gaze distant as if she was recalling a painful memory. Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. His mother, who had spent her entire life in pain and struggle, had a twin sister living a completely different life. The revelation was overwhelming, and Michael's mind raced with questions. What had happened to his mother? Why didn't she know about Abella? And most of all, what did this mean for their future? One thing was certain, Michael's world was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. Michael could barely sleep after meeting Abella. The weight of what he had learned pressed down on him, and he knew that he couldn't keep this secret from his mother any longer. One afternoon, as Mary sat by the window in her wheelchair, Michael stood before her, his heart pounding. Mom, I have to tell you something, he began, his voice unsteady. Mary turned to him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. What is it, Michael? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Michael took a deep breath, bracing himself for the impact his words would have. I met someone. A woman. She looks just like you. She says she's your twin sister. Mary froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. What? That's impossible, she whispered, shaking her head as though trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. Michael pulled out the photo of Abella and held it up for her to see. I didn't believe it either, but it's true, Mom. She had no idea you existed, and she's been looking into what happened. You were separated when you were babies, he explained, his voice cracking under the weight of the revelation. Tears welled up in Mary's eyes as she stared at the photo, her hands trembling. I have a sister, she murmured, her voice barely audible. The moment was thick with emotion as Mary tried to process the news. She had spent her whole life feeling incomplete, but never had she imagined that the missing piece was a twin sister she had never known. Michael knelt beside her, taking her hand. We're going to figure this out together, Mom, he said softly, his voice filled with determination. Mary nodded through her tears, still in shock, but for the first time in a long while, a glimmer of hope flickered in her eyes. Despite the pain of the past, Michael's words gave her strength. Together, they were ready to uncover the truth. The day Mary and Abella finally met face to face was nothing short of emotional. Michael stood beside his mother, his heart pounding as they waited in the park for Abella to arrive. When she finally appeared, walking toward them with hesitant but determined steps, Mary's breath caught in her throat. Abella looked just like her, older, more polished, but undeniably her twin. For a moment, neither of them moved, as if the gravity of the moment had frozen them in place. Then, with trembling hands, Mary wheeled herself forward, her voice catching as she whispered, I can't believe it's you. Abella knelt down in front of her, tears welling in her eyes. I've dreamed of this day, she said softly, reaching for Mary's hand. The two sisters embraced for the first time, both overwhelmed by the weight of the years they had lost. Michael watched, his own eyes misting up, realizing how life-changing this moment was for his mother. Abella held Mary tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, they would be separated once again. I'm sorry we were apart for so long, Abella whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Mary could only nod, still too overcome to speak. As the initial shock wore off, the sisters began to talk, slowly at first, like strangers catching up, but soon their conversation grew easier, more natural. They shared memories, childhood stories, and questions about the life they could have had together. Michael watched his mother light up in a way he hadn't seen in years. The weight of Sophia's presence and the struggles of their daily life seemed to lift, if only for a little while. For once, there was laughter between them, genuine, heartfelt laughter that had been missing for far too long. The following days were spent exploring their past together. They visited places from Mary and Abella's childhood, hoping to uncover more pieces of the puzzle that had kept them apart. At an old playground they once played in as toddlers, Abella reminisced, I always felt like something was missing, like a part of me wasn't there. Mary nodded, tears in her eyes. I felt the same way. I just didn't know what it was. As they walked through the city, their connection deepened, and despite the years lost, they found comfort in each other's company. Amidst the emotional discoveries, there were moments of lightness and joy. The sisters bonded over shared traits, quirks, and habits they hadn't realized they shared. Michael, too, found himself opening up to Abella, laughing as she teased him gently about his serious nature. For the first time in years, there was a sense of family beyond the cold, oppressive grip of Sophia. But even in their happiness, they knew this fragile peace wouldn't last. Sophia's secrets were on the verge of being exposed, and soon, they would have to confront the painful truth that still lingered in the shadows. The breakthrough came unexpectedly one afternoon when Michael, Mary, and Abella were combing through hospital records. They had been searching for weeks, piecing together the fragments of Mary's and Abella's early lives. Suddenly, a nurse who had worked at the hospital decades ago recognized the name on one of the files. "I remember this case," the nurse said quietly, her face darkening. "There was something strange about it, but I was told not to ask questions." As the nurse handed them a document, the truth finally began to unravel. Sophia had been involved in a cover-up, separating the twin girls at birth. For Mary, the confirmation hit like a punch to the gut. She had always felt the shadow of Sophia's control in her life, but now it was undeniable. Sophia had stolen her childhood, her family, and her identity. Mary's hands trembled as she held the papers, the weight of the betrayal almost too much to bear. She knew. All this time, she knew, Mary whispered, her voice hollow. Abella stood by her side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're going to get through this," she promised, though her own eyes were filled with pain. Michael felt a surge of anger and confusion. All this time, he had believed that Sophia, despite her harshness, had been there for them. But now, he realized she had been the cause of all their suffering. The truth was like a bitter pill, hard to swallow. He glanced at his mother, who seemed smaller than ever, cradling the papers in her hands. "What do we do now?" Michael asked quietly, his voice laced with uncertainty. They had found the truth, but it felt more like a curse than a victory. In that moment, the bond between the three of them deepened. They knew they couldn't go back to life as it had been, not now that the truth had surfaced. Mary, though heartbroken, found a new resolve. "We confront her," she said, her voice shaky but determined. Abella nodded in agreement. They couldn't let Sophia's lies control their lives any longer. It was time for Sophia to face the consequences of her actions. But the thought of confronting her terrified them all. What would she say? Would she show any remorse? As they left the hospital, the weight of the truth hung heavy over them. The brief moments of joy they had shared in reconnecting as a family were now overshadowed by the knowledge of Sophia's betrayal. But even as fear and anxiety crept in, they knew they had each other. Michael, Mary, and Abella were united in a way they hadn't been before, ready to face whatever came next. The confrontation was inevitable, and though it terrified them, they were ready for the storm that was coming. The first time Sophia laid eyes on Abella, her face went pale, and for the first time in years, the sharp, commanding woman was speechless. It was as if she were seeing a ghost. Abella's resemblance to Mary was uncanny. Who is this?" Sophia stammered, her eyes darting between the two women, disbelief etched on her face. Abella, standing tall and confident, met Sophia's gaze with a calm intensity. "I'm Abella," she said softly, her voice steady. Sophia blinked, her usual composure shattered, as she stepped back, visibly shaken. Mary, watching Sophia's reaction, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. She had spent her entire life under Sophia's control, believing that Sophia was her only family, her only protector. But now, seeing Sophia's fear and confusion, Mary understood how deep the lies must have run. "She's my sister, Sophia," Mary finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. "My twin sister." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and for a moment, everything was silent. Sophia's hands trembled, her grip on the armrest of her chair tightening as she struggled to regain control of the situation. Sophia's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. She had spent years ensuring that Mary never discovered the truth, and now, here it was, standing in front of her, in the form of a woman who looked exactly like Mary. This can't be," Sophia muttered, shaking her head as if trying to dispel the truth. But the truth was undeniable. Abella's presence was living proof of Sophia's deception, and the carefully woven lies were beginning to unravel right before her eyes. "You need to leave," Sophia barked, but the command lacked its usual authority. Michael stood beside his mother, watching Sophia's reaction with a mix of anger and satisfaction. For years, Sophia had controlled every aspect of their lives, but now, for the first time, she was losing that control. "You can't hide from this anymore," Michael said, his voice steady. "We know the truth now." Sophia's eyes snapped to Michael, and for a brief moment, he saw the fear in them, the fear of losing the power she had held over them for so long. But instead of backing down, Sophia's expression hardened, and she straightened herself, as if trying to pull herself together. "You don't know anything," she hissed, though the cracks in her facade were already showing. But the truth was out, and Sophia could no longer deny it. Abella, standing tall beside her sister, wasn't going anywhere, and Michael, Mary, and Abella all knew that the confrontation they had dreaded was finally here. Sophia's control was slipping, and for the first time, she was no longer the one pulling the strings. Her lies had been exposed, and the life she had built on deception was beginning to crumble around her. And in that moment, Sophia knew she had lost more than just her control, she had lost the family she had claimed to protect. The night of the confrontation was suffocating, the air thick with tension. Michael, Mary, and Abella gathered in the living room, knowing that this was it, the moment they had all been dreading. Sophia sat across from them, her eyes cold and calculating, but Michael could see the fear lurking just beneath the surface. "Why did you do it?" Mary finally asked, her voice trembling but strong. The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sophia didn't respond immediately, her face hardening as she stared at the three of them. "You wouldn't understand," Sophia said, her voice flat, emotionless. "I did what I had to do." Her words were sharp, but they felt empty. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the woman who had raised her, the woman she had trusted, despite everything. "You stole my life from me," Mary said, her voice cracking. "You took away my sister, my family. Why?" Sophia's composure finally cracked, her hands clenching the arms of her chair as her anger boiled over. "You were mine," she snapped. "I gave you everything. I had nothing, and I needed you." Michael watched in disbelief as Sophia's confession spilled out. She had always been cold, controlling, but this was a level of selfishness he hadn't expected. "You didn't have the right," Michael said, his voice low but firm. "You took her from a family that loved her." Sophia's eyes flashed with fury, but she said nothing. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Abella stood beside Mary, her hand on her sister's shoulder, offering silent support. The room felt like it was closing in, the weight of Sophia's betrayal suffocating them all. For Mary, it felt like everything had crumbled. The woman she had called mother for her entire life was nothing more than a thief, a liar who had stolen her childhood and her sister. "I thought you loved me," Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophia's eyes softened for a moment, but then the hardness returned. "I did what I thought was right," Sophia said coldly. "I saved you from a life of poverty. You should be grateful." The word stung, and Michael could see the pain in his mother's eyes. Gratitude? For a life built on lies? As the confrontation reached its breaking point, Michael realized that there was no redemption here. Sophia had shown her true self, a woman so consumed by her own needs that she had destroyed the lives of those around her. Mary, heartbroken and defeated, could barely look at Sophia anymore. The truth had been revealed, but it brought no closure, only more pain. And in that moment, it felt like everything was lost. The family they thought they had was gone, and all that was left was the cold, bitter truth. In the days following the confrontation, the house felt eerily quiet. Mary had retreated into herself, barely speaking, her eyes distant and hollow. Michael watched her with growing concern, feeling helpless in the face of her despair. The truth had shattered her, and now she was lost in a sea of grief and betrayal. She spent hours sitting by the window, staring out at nothing, her hands folded in her lap, as if she were trying to hold herself together. Michael wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. The weight of everything they had uncovered seemed too much to bear. Abella tried her best to reach out to Mary, but even she struggled to find the right words. "We'll get through this," she said softly one evening, sitting beside her sister. But Mary only nodded, her expression blank. The reunion that had once brought so much hope now felt tainted by Sophia's lies. I don't know who I am anymore," Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. everything I thought I knew was a lie. Abella placed a hand on Mary's, squeezing gently. You're still you, Mary. You're still my sister, she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Meanwhile, Michael was battling his own inner turmoil. He had thought that discovering the truth would bring closure, but instead, it had only brought more pain. He couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him, guilt for pushing his mother into confronting Sophia, guilt for hoping that things might finally get better. Now, it felt like all his efforts had only made things worse. He spent long hours lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if they would ever find peace again. The house, once filled with tension, now felt suffocating in its silence. Sophia, still in the house, remained a looming presence. She avoided Michael and Mary, retreating to her room like a wounded animal, licking her wounds. But even in her absence, her influence lingered. Every corner of the house felt tainted by her lies, every room a reminder of the life she had stolen from them. Michael could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, the darkness creeping into every aspect of their lives. It was as if Sophia's betrayal had cast a shadow over everything, and there was no escaping it. For Mary, the nights were the hardest. She would wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by memories of her childhood, wondering how much of it had been real. The bond she had shared with Sophia, the love she had believed in, it was all tainted now, and she didn't know how to move forward. She felt lost, like a piece of herself had been ripped away, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find her way back. And in the quiet of the night, when the house was still and the world felt far away, Mary wondered if she would ever feel whole again. After days of silence and overwhelming grief, Michael realized that they couldn't keep living like this. The weight of Sophia's betrayal hung over them like a storm cloud, but he knew they had to break free from it. One morning, Michael approached his mother, who sat in her usual spot by the window, staring blankly outside. He knelt beside her, taking her hand gently. "Mom, we can't let her control us anymore," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet determination. Mary didn't respond at first, but Michael persisted. "We know the truth now. It's time to take our lives back." Mary turned to look at her son, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "I don't know how," she whispered. Her voice was so soft, so broken, that it made Michael's heart ache. But he refused to give up. "We don't have to know everything right now," he said. "But we can't stay stuck like this. We deserve more than what she did to us." Michael's words were simple, but they carried a strength that surprised even him. He had always been the one to hold the family together, and now, more than ever, he knew he had to be that for his mother. Abella, who had been giving Mary space to process everything, joined them. "Michael's right," she said, her voice steady and calm. "We can't let Sophia win. We've already lost too much." Abella's presence had been a source of quiet strength for both Michael and Mary, and now, she was determined to help them move forward. She placed a hand on Mary's shoulder, offering comfort. "We don't have to let her lies define us. We can build something new, together." For the first time in days, Mary seemed to consider their words. She looked from Michael to Abella, her expression softening. "You really think we can do this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded firmly. "I know we can," he said, his voice unwavering. "We have each other, and that's enough." Abella smiled gently, her eyes filled with hope. "We're a family, Mary. And together, we can face whatever comes next." The shift was subtle, but it was there. Mary, though still fragile and hurt, found a glimmer of hope in the words of her son and her sister. Slowly, she nodded, the smallest spark of determination returning to her eyes. "Okay," she said quietly. "Let's move forward. Together." And with that, the path to healing, though still long and uncertain, began to open before them. The next morning, the house felt different, lighter, somehow. Michael, Mary, and Abella gathered in the living room, their minds set on the final confrontation with Sophia. This time, there was no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet determination. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift in their demeanor. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. But Michael stood firm, meeting her gaze with calm resolve. "We're done, Sophia," he said simply. "We know the truth, and we're moving on. You don't have control over us anymore." Sophia's face twisted in anger, her hands clenched into fists. "You think you can just walk away from everything I've done for you?" she spat, her voice rising. But Mary, standing beside Michael, didn't flinch. "What you did for me," she repeated, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "You stole my life, Sophia. You took away my sister, and you kept me in the dark for years. That's not love. That's control." Sophia faltered, the fury in her eyes flickering as Mary's words hit her with a truth she couldn't deny. Abella stepped forward, her presence calm and grounded. "We're not here to fight you, Sophia," she said quietly. "We're here to let go. We've spent too long living under the weight of your lies. But that ends today." Sophia's anger began to crumble, replaced by a hollow emptiness. She looked at the three of them, Michael, Mary, and Abella, and for the first time, she realized that she had lost. There was nothing left to say, no more lies to tell. Her control had slipped away, and now, all that remained was the silence between them. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. He looked at his mother, who, though still fragile, stood tall beside him. Together, they turned their backs on Sophia, walking away from the house that had once been a prison. The door closed behind them, and with it, they left behind the years of manipulation and deceit. There was no more room for anger, no more room for pain, only the promise of something new, something better. As they stepped outside into the sunlight, Michael felt a sense of peace wash over him. The past had been painful, but now, they had a future to look forward to, a future free from Sophia's control. Mary smiled softly, her hand resting in Abella's as they walked together, the bond between them stronger than ever. Michael glanced at them, a small smile tugging at his lips. They had been through so much, but they had each other. And that, more than anything, was what mattered. With Sophia no longer a part of their lives, Michael, Mary, and Abella set out to rebuild what had been broken. Abella invited them to stay with her, offering a fresh start in a home that was free from the shadows of the past. Mary, though still recovering from the emotional wounds Sophia had inflicted, slowly began to heal. Each day brought new challenges, but there was a quiet strength in her now, a determination to live the life she had always deserved. Michael, too, felt the weight lift from his shoulders as he embraced the chance for a new beginning. Life with Abella was different, peaceful, full of light and warmth that Michael had never known. The bond between the three of them grew stronger with each passing day, as they learned to navigate their new family dynamic. Mary and Abella spent hours talking, catching up on the years they had lost, and with each conversation, the wounds of the past began to heal. Michael, no longer burdened by the fear and secrecy that had once ruled their lives, focused on his future. For the first time, he felt hopeful, imagining a life where he didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. As the days turned into weeks, they began to make new memories, moments of joy that replaced the pain of the past. Abella's home became a sanctuary for them all, a place where they could finally breathe and live freely. Michael continued to help his mother, but now it wasn't out of necessity, it was out of love and a desire to see her thrive. He watched as Mary slowly came back to life, her laughter returning, her eyes no longer clouded with pain. It was a long journey, but every step forward felt like a victory. Though the scars of their past would always remain, they had each other, and that was enough. Abella's presence brought a sense of wholeness to their family that had been missing for so long. For Mary, the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore gave her the strength to move forward. She still had moments of doubt, moments where the weight of everything that had happened threatened to overwhelm her, but with Michael and Abella by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. Together, they built a new life, free from the lies that had once held them captive. The future wasn't without its challenges, but for the first time in years, it was filled with hope. They were a family, stronger for what they had endured, and ready to face whatever came their way. And as they continued to move forward, they knew one thing for certain: the past no longer had the power to define them. They had reclaimed their lives, and together, they were finally free. The final image was one of quiet peace and healing. Michael, Mary, and Abella walked together through the park, the late afternoon sun casting a soft glow over everything. The gentle breeze rustled the trees, and the sound of laughter from nearby children filled the air. Mary, though still frail, walked with more strength than she had in years, her arm linked with Abella's. Michael walked beside them, his hands in his pockets, a soft smile on his face as he watched the two women who had become the heart of his world. As they strolled along the path, they passed the same candy stand where Michael had once stood, selling sweets to help keep them afloat. He glanced at it briefly, remembering the weight of those days, the constant pressure to survive. But now, those memories felt distant, like shadows that no longer had power over him. Life had changed. He had changed. And as he looked at his mother and his aunt, he felt a sense of completeness that he had never known before. They paused by a bench, sitting down to enjoy the golden light of the setting sun. Mary leaned her head on Abella's shoulder, her eyes closed, a peaceful smile on her lips. Michael sat across from them, his heart full. He had fought so hard to protect his family, to uncover the truth, and now they were finally free. Free from the lies, free from Sophia's control, free to live the life they had always deserved. It was a new chapter, one filled with hope and love, and Michael knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Michael felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had come through the darkness, and now, there was only light ahead. He reached out, taking his mother's hand, and Abella smiled at him, her eyes filled with warmth. Together, they sat in silence, content to simply be in the moment, knowing that they had found something precious, each other. The image of the three of them, sitting together as the sun set behind them, marked the beginning of their new life. It wasn't perfect, and there were still scars that would take time to heal, but they had each other, and that was enough. As the last rays of sunlight bathed them in a soft, golden glow, the future stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope.